Welcome back to the channel, guys, and today we are going to look at the 2019 Agricultural Science paper 2 past paper. Alright, watch to the end. I answer all the questions and I'm sure it will help you in your exams. Also, I inserted in the description, and I will also leave it in the comment, is a time guide that you can use to reach your questions quickly. So all you need to do is to check that time guide out and use it as much as possible. So for example, if you need to reach question 10, you just click on question 10 on the guideline and it will take you directly to that question. All right, let's get into it. Alright, so the instruction there, it says this paper consists of 6 questions in 3 sections. Answer all questions. Alright. Alright, so number 1 there, it says 1A, Farmer George cultivates vegetable crops and his half-acre organic farm, which is situated on a hillside, and obtains water from a river that runs below his farm. Number 1. Define the term organic farming. So I wrote the definition there. It says organic farming. This is farming in which little to no inorganic chemicals are used. And for example, there I put glyphosate. So the glyphosate is a herbicide that is formulated in the factory from synthetic materials. So what that is saying is that organic farming there, on that type of farm, you will not involve substances or chemicals that is formulated synthetically in a factory. Alright, so on your farm you use methods, for example, like biological pest control. You use your organic manures, your green manures, your organic herbicides and pesticides and supplements. Alright, so you keep away from factory-made chemicals that are made from synthetic materials. So importantly, what you need to understand is that you can use inorganic chemicals, but that would be a last resort. That is if your farm is going to be totally destroyed, then you use it if you don't have any other means of getting out of your problem. Also, what I want you to understand is that when you're doing these short answer questions, you need to look at the marks, and that will tell you exactly how much writing to do. So right here you see it asks for a definition, right? So you would give a definition, but you also give an example to help clarify your definition, right? So that will give you clearly the 2 marks. All right, so the second part of the question goes, state one disadvantage of organic farming. Alright, so disadvantage here means a bad thing about it, or difficult or challenging thing about doing organic farming. So number 1 there, it says organic inputs are expensive and scarce. Alright, so if you're going to do organic farming, the inputs like chicken manure to do all your farm, for example, can get very scarce. You would have to have a lot of chicken manure. Alright, so those materials are normally expensive. They are more expensive than the inorganic because it takes a while and it takes effort to maintain organic materials. Alright, number 2, it takes 3 years to be certified. So right, so depending on the policies, right, the government will certify you as an organic farmer when you practice up to 3 years. In order to get rid of all your inorganic materials from your farm, whether it be chemicals in the soil, weeds, plants, you don't want your plants to be genetically modified. So in order for you to reach that standard, it is normally certified by the government after 3 years, and that's a long time, right? For you to start making some real money from your organic farm. Alright, because one of the advantages of organic farming is that you can sell your products more expensive, but if you're not certified, you will not be able to do that legally. Alright, so let's move to the third point. The third part of the question, it says, explain one way in which Farmer George organic farm can benefit the environment. So benefit there means good thing. Alright, so number one, I have it maintains ecological balance and biodiversity. You will have more organisms staying alive, more plants, different variety of plants staying alive, different animals in the soil, in the environment staying alive. And what that do is that you have biodiversity, which means different living things. Alright, and ecological balance now means organisms depending on each other. And what happened with the inorganic chemicals is that when you use them a lot on the farms, they kill everything. Sometimes they are non-selective, so sometimes they kill good organisms and bad organisms together, and that will destroy the biodiversity. It says explain, so very important. If it says explain, and if you look at the marks, it says 2 marks. So just to state it here, you'd get 1 mark. If you're going to explain, it means you should define, you give example, you give reasons, etc. But here I gave an example. It says more plants and animals will remain alive in the environment which depends on each other. Examples: bees pollinate plants. So right, if you use inorganic chemicals on your farm, what will happen is that inorganic chemical will kill bees. Some of them kill the bees, and the bees is good for farming, right? So in this example, it is showing you that organic farming, you will not use those non-selective chemicals that will destroy your bees. Alright, so the good thing is that organic farming is best for the environment, for biodiversity and ecological balance. Alright, so let's move to the next question. Alright, so we have part B of question number 1. Farmer George recently rented Farmer Mary a plot of land adjacent to his farm to establish a vegetable plot. Farmer Mary uses genetically modified seeds, pesticides, and artificial fertilizers to grow our crops. Farmer George has applied for organic certification for his farm, and his application was denied. Using information from the scenario above suggests 3 reasons why Farmer George's application was denied. Alright, before I get into the answering of that, let's analyze the question. It says Farmer Mary uses genetically modified seeds, which that means that farm is inorganic farming. Pesticides and artificial fertilizers. Again, that is telling you that the farm of Mary is inorganic farming. Alright, and they are very close. So that's what the question is saying. Alright, number 1. Genetically modified seeds can be easily transferred to Farmer George farm. Alright, so because they are close, the farms are relatively close, and seeds, those inorganic seeds or genetically modified seeds, they can be easily blown to Mr. George farm. More likely his farm will have those genetically modified plants or seeds eventually. Alright, number 2. The pesticides used will destroy beneficial insects that will be needed on Farmer George farm. Right, so in doing organic farming, you will have a lot of insects on those farms. So for example, you might be walking on the farm, you see a lot of wasps, bees, on the plants in an organic farm, right? Sometimes you might be scared by just walking on those farms, the amount of insects you will see. So what will happen eventually, if you have pesticides that are non-selective and inorganic nearby, those insecticides can drift into the atmosphere, killing those good organisms and insects. So what will happen is that eventually there will not be an environment suitable for those insects to survive. Hence that is a problem. Alright, number 3. Plants grown with artificial fertilizer will produce inorganic seeds that can be transferred to Farmer George farm. So the inorganic fertilizer, some of those nutrients can leach over to Farmer George farm. When those inorganic fertilizers are taken up by those plants become inorganic as well. All right, seeds produced from those fertilizers will be inorganic as well. So that's a problem for farmer George. He will be affected. Their farms are too close. So those are three reasons why that could cause him to be denied. All right. All right. So let's move to section C of question number 1. Section C. The Ministry of Agriculture in country A is asking the government for an increase in budgetary allocation for agriculture. Suggest 2 reasons the minister could use to justify the request for an increase in the budgetary allocation for agriculture. In other words, what this is saying is good things about agriculture, right? So you're going to look at the good side. What are the benefits of agriculture? So here goes. Number 1, to increase GDP and GNP. GDP means gross domestic product, and GNP means gross national product, right? So in other words, to increase food production and even foreign exchange. That's what number 1 is saying. So GNP would bring in foreign exchange. GDP would make sure that there is food security, enough food in a country. All right, so that's a good reason. Number 2, to increase jobs. The more agriculture you have, you can have more factories, more byproducts, more the creation of more jobs, a better lifestyle. All right, lifestyle improve for people. All right, number 3, to improve food security. All right, that will food security means that agriculture will develop and you'll have more production of food, maybe more technology also to store those food and hence keep food within a country, and that's 2 marks. So select any 2 of those and explain and you get that 2 marks. All right, it says suggest 2 reasons. So you just make your suggestions, and as I said, if you give examples, you're more likely to secure all marks and impress the markers. All right, so you want to impress them with your knowledge. That's what you want to do. Remember, guys. All right, so here we're at number 2. So 2A has 2 sections. Number 1, here goes. Define the term value chain. All right, so as it says, value chain. Here goes. This is the different strategies that workers would apply to ensure customers are pleased. Example, good communication, etc. All right, so let's break down what is value chain for you so you have a better understanding of what it is. So if you are familiar with the term supply chain and value chain, it means getting the goods from one sector to the consumer, which is normally the final person, right? So if you're a businessman and you're producing chickens, getting the chickens from the farm to the supermarket, that would be a chain. From the farm to the supermarkets, from the supermarkets to the shop, from the shops to the homes, which the homes, the persons who that finally consume them, that would be your final consumer. So all those different sections that I just listed, where the chicken has to pass, that would be your chain. Now, each chain has people, managers, supervisors, right? And you know, it's not just to get them to the product. You want to make sure you have a good relationship with them so that they can be motivated, they can trust your business, that you will provide good food for them, good chicken meat, they can rely on you and so forth. So the value chain will involve those relationships that you have with those different people in those different areas or business units. All right, so value chain focuses on like good communication skills, right? Promotions, not getting angry with your customers or the workers. You just try to manage your anger. All right, you be pleasant with them. You always smile. So that's where the value will, enhance people life and encourage them to want to purchase from you. They feel good to shop from you. All right, so that's the value chain. The second part of the question goes, state one major difference between a supply chain and a value chain. All right, so as I said, the supply chain and the value chain is similar. It's just that the value chain focuses on the relationship between the people, while the supply chain focuses on the physical product, moving the physical product from point A to point B to C and to the customers directly. So Supply chain focuses on the physical product, which means sourcing the product, transporting the product, manufacturing the product, make sure there is enough product. While value chain focuses on interrelationship with the different persons at the different business units. Alright, so let's move to part B of question 2. Farmers in Mount Dew have been the only suppliers of yam in their area for over 10 years. Recently, they have been complaining that the price of their yams have been reduced by 50% over the past year. Number 1. Suggest 3 reasons for the reduction in the price of yam. Alright, so let us look at the question and analyze. And I always encourage that you analyze their questions. So they are the only suppliers. So these are keywords. So that the price of their yam. So the price, I think the price is being affected here, and that's by 50%. Alright, so they are the only supplier, and the two ticks, the price goes down. Alright, so just 3 reasons for the reduction in price of the yam. Alright, number 1, it could be a glut on the market, meaning too much yam on the market. And when there's too much yam on the market, they have to sell it cheaper in order to get rid of their yams, because they don't want to have the yam and they spoil. So in order to get them sell, they have to reduce their price. Alright, so you could have a glut of the yam on the market, and that will reduce the selling price. Alright, number 2, alternative products to yam may be there. Alright, so there could be alternative to yams being developed. So maybe persons are buying dasheen and cocoa, and the dasheen and cocoa price is lower than that of yam. So in order to get the yam sell, the sellers have to reduce their price, because the buyers won't buy it if it's that expensive. They just go and buy dasheen. Alright, number 3, quality low due to infertile soil. So here, because they're farming on the lands for over 10 years, what could happen is that the land becomes infertile, thus producing low quality yam, and the buyers are not willing to purchase those yam for a very expensive price. Alright, so that could be another reason. And if you know more, you can just leave them in the comments. Alright, guys, let's move to section 2 of number 2 question. Question 2 goes, suggest one way in which the farmers of Mount Dew could get better price for their yams. Number 1, what they could do is to reduce production. Alright, and what that will do is, because buyers don't have enough, they will be demanding it a lot. And what the sellers will do now, they will raise their price. And because the buyers want that yam, they will be forced to buy it at a higher price because they want it. Alright, so that's what happened in shortage. Alright, number 2, they could improve the quality of their yam. Alright, so as I said, possibly the soil may become infertile, so what they could do is to enrich their soil and produce better quality yam, if that was a case. Alright, let's move to C of the question. Suraj is unemployed and wants to start rearing livestock to earn an income. Even though he has never reared livestock before, Suraj has no land on which to establish his livestock farm. He has identified a nearby plot and land belonging to his neighbors who lives overseas, which he can use to rear his livestock. Suraj has not determined the size of his operation, the cost or type of livestock he wants to rear. He is advised by his friend to visit the Agricultural Development Bank to apply for a loan to purchase the livestock. Consider the scenario above. Advise Suraj of 3 challenges that he may encounter in trying to obtain a loan. Alright, so let's analyze the question. So, one here it says that he's unemployed. Alright, keyword. Also, he has no land, so he's not the owner of the land, right? He has not determined the size of his operation. You don't know how much he's going to start out with. Alright, and he has no experience. He has never reared livestock before. So livestock are animals that are reared for food, right? So your chicken, goat, cattle, etc. Those are your livestock. But he has never raised them before. So let us look at 3 challenges that he may face when he's obtaining a loan. So next keyword and last but not least is the loan. Anyways, let's go into the answers. Number 1, he lacks the expertise and experience in livestock rearing. They will not trust him because he lacks the experience. Number 2, he lacks the security, which he does not own the land. So what happened? If he doesn't own the land, the bank might not lend him the loan because he doesn't have a security. Alright, so there's a problem with him to secure the loan. And number 3, he lacks budget or a business plan. Normally when you're taking out a business loan, the bank always requests a business plan or a budget. So they want to know the type of business, right? What type of animal, where it's going to locate, how many you're going to buy, how much for the building cost, etc. So they're not going to put their money where they're not sure about. So those are 3 points and 3 challenges that Suraj might face. Alright, so let's move to section 2 of the paper. So it says answer all questions in this section. So 3A, 1. Define the term vegetative propagation. Alright, so the keyword here is vegetative propagation. And vegetative here means plant parts. So vegetative propagation, it's referring to plants. And of course, there are 2 types of propagation, reproduction in plants. There is sexual and there is asexual. So vegetative propagation is referring to the asexual reproduction in plants, right? So the definition here it goes: the multiplication of new offsprings without the use of sex cells. Plants use parts such as leaves, stems, roots, and buds to propagate the new plants. Alright, so here, as you can see, is the production of new plants without the use of sex cells or seeds. So plants that reproduce sexually, they use seeds. Plants that reproduce asexually, they don't use seed. So in other words, vegetative propagation, they produce plants without using seeds. The sex cells, the pollen grain, the ovules, etc. They don't use those parts. So in other words, vegetative propagation involves plants producing new offsprings or new plants by using their leaves, stems, roots, buds. Alright? Whichever is suitable for that plant. Alright. Number 2, section 2 here, it says state 1 vegetative propagation method used to produce banana plants. Now the most common method is tissue culture. Alright, so a tissue which is made up of some cell, it is taken from the banana plant, right, and it is cultivated in a petri dish with nutrient solution and enzymes and hormones to grow in a lab. So let's move on. Alright, B of question 3 says Farmer Wayne wants to plant a plot of cassava. The extension officer visits his farm and advises him that proper primary tillage is important in cassava production. Number 1. Suggest 2 reasons why proper primary tillage is important in preparing the soil for planting cassava. Alright guys, so cassava is a root tuber. It is the root of the cassava plant that will be harvested. It will be stored with food. Alright, so you want to make sure the soil is well tilled, well plowed, deep enough for those roots to develop so they can be harvested for food. Alright, so primary tillage here, the next keyword is primary tillage. Primary tillage means the first breaking of the soil. It's not the refining of the soil. It's the breaking of the soil. The first breaking means you cut the soil in large lumps, you turn it over. So there's 2 reasons why proper primary tillage is important in preparing for planting cassava. Alright, so as I said, number 1, cassava is a root tuber, hence need well plowed soil to develop easily. You want to make sure your cassava's roots can grow easily. You don't want them to be struggling. So it's important that the first breaking of the soil is done properly. Alright, and number 2, to enhance lots of oxygen and nutrients in the soil. So when you do primary tillage, you turn over the soil, you put the humus down in the soil, you spread out the nutrients, and you get more oxygen to come in the soil. And as you know, oxygen grow plants faster than if they are lacking in oxygen. Alright, so that's the answers. Alright, part 2 of the question goes, other than tillage, state one land preparation method that Farmer Wayne must be used in preparing his plot of land to plant the cassava crop. Alright, so the key word here is land preparation. Alright, so here I have land clearing. So as you know, land preparation, you have a lot of methods, right? You have a lot of practices in land preparation. So you could do land clearing, drain formation, trench formation, lining of the land, and so forth. But it says that he must do, and I say land clearing for the answer. Alright, section C of the question, it says Mrs. Brown wants to expand her hot pepper farm. The extension officer advises her that she should use mechanical land preparation method instead of manual methods. Figure 1 shows 2 implements that are used for tillage. Implement A is here and implement B is here. 1. Normally, Mrs. Brown would use a fork to perform primary tillage manually. Which of the implements A or B could she use for primary tillage? State one reason in support of your choice. Alright, so the best answer there is B. For primary tillage, as I said, it is for the first breaking of the soil, and what happened is that the disc being far apart is suitable for primary tillage. Alright, being far apart means it will cut the soil in lumps and turn the soil. So this is the disc plow, and it is commonly used for primary tillage. You could use the moldboard plow as well. Alright, this one over here, as you can see, it has a lots of teeth or tines, and they are close. So this shows that this implement would do refining. So refining would be secondary tillage. So this is not suitable for primary tillage. Alright, so the reason is that this being far apart will cut and turn bigger chunks of soil. Alright, section 2 of the question says, suggest 2 advantages and 1 disadvantage of using machinery in land preparation. Alright, so advantage here means the good thing. So more work is done in less time. So that's one of the advantage. More work will be done. And 2, it saves money on labor. So instead of getting labor to do the work, if you do machine, you use machine, it can save you money on labor. Oh, the disadvantages now is the bad things, the challenging things about machinery is that it is expensive to purchase and maybe to maintain. If you should burst a tire, etc. You know that tires are expensive, right? But to even purchase the machinery first to put on your farm is very expensive. Alright, 2, you have less employment, so it could be a disadvantage for people, but not for the business when you have less people. And 3, terrain challenges. When you're using machinery, farmers who have hilly lands, those hilly lands may not be able to accommodate certain type of machinery. So that's bad. Alright, number 4. So we're at question number 4. Farmer Steve cultivates tomatoes on clay soil. He observes that during harvest in the rainy season, the fruits have cracked and splitting skins. The extension officer visits his farm and identifies that too much water is the cause of the problem. State 3 cultural practices Farmer Steve can use to address the problems of excess water in the soil. So here it is talking about in the soil and cultural practices. The crop now they're talking about is tomatoes, and the soil is clay soil. Alright, number 1, the farmer needs to put in drain and trenches where necessary, and this will help the clay soil to drain easily. Number 2, he could put his tomato plants on ridges or beds, right? That will help to drain the water as well. And 3, pruning. So he could remove excess leaves from the tomatoes and branches and leaves, and what that will do is to allow more air and sunlight to pass through the crops, and so they will not be split because there's a high humidity of water in between the plants. Alright, so we have section B here, and this is a genetic question, a very interesting question. Alright, so I'll go through this. I want to fill it out while I'm doing the presentation, so that's why I didn't fill it out before. Alright, so B says Neela is a plant breeder who wants to breed a red stem celery plant. To achieve this, she crosses 2 plants with the RR gene for red stem. The offspring of this cross is called the F1 generation. Alright, F1 generation there, it means just the first set of offspring from the parents. Alright, so let's get into this now. So this is the Punnett square here. Once you're dealing with plants, you know we're talking about the flower. So the male flower, which is the stamen, so the male parts of the flower. So say these are from the stamen, which is the male, or the pollen grain. Some people would say male. Alright, so these are the male sex cells, or the pollen grain gene makeup, right? Which is a dominant and a recessive gene, which is heterozygous. And here you have the carpel, which is the female parts of the flower, the ovule. So the female side, the ovule will have this gene makeup. So both of them have the same gene makeup, right? So what you're going to do now is to, let's see, it says 1 year to complete table 1 to show the genotype of the F1 generation. So these 4 possibilities, these 4 squares will give you the offsprings, which is the F1 generation right here. So let's fill it out. So to fill out this one, you're going to match this one with this one. So capital R, which is dominant, and capital right here. So that's the first possibility for these two. To fill out this one, you're going to match this one with this one. So you practice by writing out the dominant allele first, and then this one, which is the recessive. And then to find this one now, you're going to match this one with this one, but you put the dominant one first, and then this one. And to fill out this part, you're going to match this and this. So those are 2 recessive. Alright, so that is how it goes to fill it out. That's what you have to do to get the 2 marks. So if you have that, you will get the 2 marks. Alright. Now, number 2, the second part of the question says, calculate the percentage of plants that will be heterozygous. So that's the key word, heterozygous, for red stem color. Heterozygous. So this is heterozygous, meaning it has 1 dominant and 1 recessive allele. This also is also another heterozygous. This one up here, this is homologous, meaning both of them are same. This is homologous recessive, meaning both of them are same. Alright, so you have 4 possibilities here, and as you can see, you have 2 heterozygous possibilities here. So out of the 4, so you do a little maths right there now. So out of the 4, you have 2 heterozygous. So this is you'd have 2 over 4 times 100, because you're referring to percentage. 100 over 1. So 2 into itself, 1. 2 into 4, 2. 2 into itself 1, 2 into 100 goes 50. So the percentage of plants becoming heterozygous is 50% chance. Alright, you can also look at it and judge it because you have four possibilities. So this would be, so each square would be 25%, but because I asked you to calculate, then you calculate. So 25, each square, as I said, would be 25%. So once you understand one of these questions, you always understand the rest. Each one is 25%. Alright, so if you know this one is 25 and this one is 25, so add both of them and that would be 50. But if you're going to show the working out, then this is a good way to show it. Alright, so let's move on. Alright, part C of the question says, genetic engineering is used to produce crops such as extended shelf life tomatoes. Explain 2 ways in which farmers can benefit from growing genetically modified crops. Alright, so the key word there is genetic engineering. So you know you have 3 ways of doing genetic engineering, guys. It means you change the genetic makeup of a plant or animal. So you could take genes from plant to put on a plant. You can take genes from bacteria, viruses, put in plants or to put in animals. You can do genetic deduction. Say for example chicken, you don't want the chicken to grow feathers. You can just take out the gene that is responsible for feather growth and the chickens will grow without feathers. So for tomatoes, what they could do is they can make new tomato plants that have long shelf life. Alright, so some of the advantages of that is that you can also design disease resistant plants. Right. Number 2, larger yields. So initially corns that you used to weren't so big in history. So what happened is that they carry genetic modification on those plants, and what happened, the corns, they are now growing bigger than before. Right. Also with soya bean, for those persons who know about soya bean, I think it's I'm not sure if it's a fungus or a bacteria that resists the herbicides. So when they sprayed herbicides on those soya bean plants, the herbicides will not kill the soya bean plants, but they will kill the other weeds. So they are genetically modified to resist herbicides. Alright, so those are 2 advantages. So it has advantages and it has disadvantages. But alright, so section C of the paper, it says section 3. So let's go to 5, question number 5. Figure 2 show Farmer John's animal feeding on forage. Alright, so these are cattle and they are indoor. A. Part 1 of A says, identify the method being used to feed forage to the animals. And of course, as you can see, it is zero grazing, meaning they are not allowed to go outside to eat. The feed is taken to them inside a house or a pen. Alright, so they are not allowed to go out and eat grass or forage. It is taken to them. So this is zero grazing. And that's 1 mark. Alright, part 2 of A says, state 1 advantage and 1 disadvantage of using the method shown in figure 2 to feed forage to animals. Alright, so 1 advantage and 1 disadvantage. 1 good thing and 1 bad thing. The advantage is that disease prevention. You can be able to prevent disease because, for example, you could dry the grass if you're going to use grass. Those dry grass would not have a lot of worm eggs on it. Also, the feed is not trampled on. They are not able to defecate in their feed or urinate. Alright, so they prevent disease. And with this method also, you have protection from other animals that may intrude. Alright, the disadvantage is it is very expensive and it is very labor dependent. So in order to feed the animals, you always have to have persons there to feed them, and maybe to cut up the grass, or cut up the feed and take it to the animals. Alright, so it's very labor intensive and dependent. Part 3 of the question says, suggest 2 reasons why it is important for Farmer George to include forage when animal feeding is done. Alright, so forage there mean any plants that the animals eat, whether it be grass, hibiscus, any plants. So one advantage of that is that it is very rich in nutrients, vitamins, minerals, so it is a natural source of nutrients. 2, forages are easily digested for animals, especially cattle. They do fermentation and they can break down cellulose, and forages, especially mature grass, they are filled with cellulose. Alright, so part B of the question 5, it says a farmer who practices rotational grazing observes that parasites infestation is well controlled in his cattle. 1. Suggest 3 ways in which rotational grazing helps to control the level of parasite infestation. Alright, so here it speaks about rotational grazing, meaning moving the animals from one paddock to the next. So from one pasture to the next. Alright, so it says suggest 3 ways in which rotational grazing help to control parasites. Alright, so parasites like worms, ticks, they have a life cycle. Number 1, let's go through them. Animals are moved from a paddock before parasite life cycle is completed. So you try to move the animals before they can re-eat the eggs of those parasites. And 2, a fixed housing is not used which would be suitable for parasite infestation. So in rotational grazing, you don't really have to make a fixed housing where the animals go in every night. So what will happen, parasites like lice that live in the building, you can avoid all of those. And 3, animals feed high, hence less chance of eating eggs. So because you rotate the animals, they will have tall fresh grass each time. They are not forced to eat very low, where they will eat more germs, more eggs. They are eating high. You force them to eat high when you rotate them, so they consume less parasites and parasites eggs. Alright, part 2 of the question says, during the rainy season, it is easier for farmers to obtain forage to feed their animals. However, in the dry season, many farmers experience difficulty finding high quality forage to feed their animals. Suggest 2 methods farmers can implement in order to conserve forage for use in dry season. Alright, so what the farmer can do, number 1, is to make hay. So what hay will do is to dry the grass. So you cut the grass or the feed and you dry them and you keep them in their dry state to feed the animal. 2, they can venture into silage making, which is you cut the forage but you make it ferment. So you could put them in drums, you could put them under the tarpaulin and you let it ferment. So silo is fermenting food. Some of it can be in liquid form as well. You could put it in a drum, cut it up, put it in a drum. You add your mineral salts to it, your citrus pulp to it, your wheat meddling, and you cover it tight and allow it to ferment. So one is in dry state, one is in fermentation state, which will be very suitable for the ruminant stomach, the fermented state. Alright, question number 6. Farmer Telly wants to increase the size of his dairy herd but finds it very costly to rear bulls. He is advised by the extension officer to make use of the artificial insemination services provided by the Ministry of Agriculture in his area. A. One of A state 2 reasons why Farmer Telly is encouraged to use artificial insemination as a method of breeding in his dairy enterprise. Number 1 goes, no need to raise bulls that may be expensive or aggressive. Number 2, it is suitable to be used with oistros synchronization. To facilitate oistros synchronization, AI is very good. So it could also improve efficiency on his farm if you do AI, because with AI you can carry out oistros synchronization, which means you can put the animals and eat without allowing them to come and eat naturally. And by you putting them and eat, you know that you can just use the AI now to go and fertilize those eggs. Alright, so with AI, you can facilitate oistros synchronization, which is very efficient comparing to using a natural animal to inseminate the females. Alright, so let's move to part 2. It says, state one problem farmer Telly might encounter in using AI insemination in his dairy enterprise. So one problem is that it is labor intensive. Someone has to be there, or a person has to be there to do it. Also, persons have to be taking records to find out when the animals are synchronized, when they come and eat. They have to detect that. Normally, if you have a bull or bulls, they can detect if the animal is on eat. But if you're not going to use bulls, then you would have to be able, persons would have to be there to check when the animals come and eat. And 2, the persons carrying out the AI has to be trained or certified. It has to have some technical expertise. Alright, section B, it says here, after using the artificial insemination services provided by the Ministry of Agriculture, Farmer Telly observed that none of his cows conceived. So just 3 possible reasons why none of the cows conceive. 1, the sperm could die because of improper storage. 2, the procedure may be done incorrectly. And 3, contamination of the semen. Alright, so if it's on part of the Ministry of Agriculture, it means that something is wrong with the semen or the sperm. But if there's a problem on part of the farmer Telly, it means that maybe the animal did not come and eat, and he did not have the technical expertise to do it correctly. Alright, C, farmer Zoe placed a batch of eggs in an incubator to hatch. After 21 days, she noticed that none of the eggs hatched. Alright, so incubation is when heat is added to the eggs so the chickens can develop and hatch, right? And that takes 21 days. Number 1. So there's 2 possible reasons why the eggs did not hatch. One reason is that maybe the eggs were not fertilized. Number 2, infection of the eggs. The eggs, they could take up infection if they are not cleaned properly. Bacteria or fungus could enter through the shell, which have tiny holes in it, and kill the egg. Or the incubator may not be working properly. May not have enough water. So if you don't have enough water for humidity, the egg can actually dry out and die. And part 2 of the question says, upon closer examination of the eggs, the shell were observed to be thin and cracked. Explain one reason for this observation. Well, eggshell is made of calcium, so it could mean that the chicken feed, they did not have enough calcium. So the chickens, they were lacking in calcium. Alright, so that's the end of the test. And guys, remember to use the time guideline that I will provide to get to the questions quicker. Alright, please remember to share the video, share it with your students, share it with your peers, share it with everyone you can. Please stay tuned. Look out for another video soon.